So, Sensei asked me to give a talk, and in putting this together, I was reminded of something that happened a couple of, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Seiju, I think you were there, but we had that one Monday evening when we sat in Bell Park, I think in Boulder, and Showan was reading that fantastic essay by Reb Anderson that was in Lion's Roar. And I can't remember the name of it now, but it was such a wonderful essay. And I remember at some point it reminded me of an old story, and I tried to refer to it, and it was on the tip of my tongue, and it wasn't there. In any case, I went home and looked it up, and yeah, sure enough, there's a story. It's called. It's got a generic name to it. The Taoist story of the farmer. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of you have heard of it or are familiar with it. But I thought I looked that story up and I read it and I thought, oh yeah, of course, yes. And the story, it just spoke to me through the lens of the Bardo. I thought, okay, well that sounds like a good basis for a talk, and that's what I'd like to share with you tonight. So I'm kind of curious. Does anyone know that story, the story of the old Taoist farmer who has a horse, and the horse runs away? Yeah, it's a very famous story. I would think many people have heard it. Most of you may have heard of it. But anyway, I thought, okay, well, I know people are familiar with it, but let me see if I can kind of push this into some terrain that's maybe not mentioned a lot when we look at that story. So that's what I'd like to do with you tonight. As you know, our theme for this Ango practice is the Bardo of everyday life. Sensei has been developing that theme, and so I thought I would continue with this talk tonight about it. So, like I said, there is this Taoist story that I think manifests the experience of life in the Bardo. Again, Bardo meaning that experience of being in between states, that intermediate realm where we have left one shore of the river and we are swimming in the flux and flow of life, and the other shore has yet to appear. It's in like that intermediary place in our lives, right? So here's a story about life in the Bardo. Like I was saying, it's a well-known story that I think many of us have heard, right? But I want to talk about it in the context of the Bardo. Here's the story. An old Taoist farmer worked his crops for many years. One day his horse ran away. Upon hearing the news, his neighbors came to visit. Such bad luck, they said sympathetically. Maybe, the farmer replied. The next morning the horse returned, bringing with it 3 other wild horses. How wonderful, the neighbors exclaimed. Maybe, replied the old man. The following day his son tried to ride one of the untamed horses. He was thrown and broke his leg. The neighbors again came to offer their sympathy for what they called his misfortune. Maybe, answered the farmer. The day after, military officials came to the village to draft young men into the army. Seeing that the son's leg was broken, they passed him by. The neighbors congratulated the farmer on how well things had turned out. Maybe, said the farmer. So that's the story. And there's been, I looked it up online, and there's various iterations of that story, but it's all coming to that theme, right? Where the farmer just replies maybe, or will. Some people will translate it as, well, we'll see, right? Something like that. So in any case, contemplating this story, a question comes to mind for me. Why is it that the farmer responds to these experiences with the horse and his son, and when the villagers come to talk to him, with maybe? Right? That's the most obvious question, I think. In the villagers' case, they see the experiences that have happened to the farmer with certainty. With wonderment or a sense of misfortune, they judge it either one way or the other about what happens to the farmer. But why does the farmer view these events differently than the villagers? Clearly, he sees something that the villagers don't. Maybe, he says, when they congratulate or sympathize with him. When they consider that the old man has lost a horse or that his son has broken his leg, they see this occurrence in isolation, not considering the flux and flow of interconnectedness of life events. They lament his bad luck. They pass judgment on the experience and label it unfortunate. The old farmer, in their eyes, warrants their sympathy. But the farmer is in the bardo. Maybe, he says. He is in that intermediary state of in-between. He has awareness, an awakened mind. He is on that ground, on that island in the stream, in the flux and flow of life, where events are always interconnected, where outcomes are adjustable, and where life is always an integrated process of becoming. Certainty has vanished. When the villagers express happiness that the farmer has gained 3 new horses and congratulate him on not losing his son to the army, they give voice to that transactional view of the world, where things are a means to an end, where with 3 new horses, there's a guarantee of more money and a great harvest. It's a dualistic vision of experience, where things are either good or bad, where self encounters others and competes with others, and life is sliced and diced into discrete packets of meaning and value, where the eyes are fixed on an outcome. But the farmer sees these experiences differently. Beginnings and endings are not so tangible. He is in the bardo. He sees the emptiness, the illusory quality of experience. He is not so quick to label. His experience is contingent, interdependent, interwoven in an infinitely complex array of possibility. When I think about that, it's like the feeling that comes up is, oh my gosh, how scary, or maybe how liberating, or both. The doors of the bardo open us to the possibilities of joy, to the likelihood of knowing who we are. Our true nature appears in those gaps when we let go of certainty that we know something. Swimming in the bardo, or working in the bardo, like the old Taoist farmer, like we all do, means we can see something with fresh eyes. Now, what struck me about this and about seeing something with fresh eyes is that I know personally I'm challenged with that all the time in my life with my family and my 2 teenage daughters. I definitely feel like I'm constantly swimming between those 2 shores of up, not knowing up or down, sometimes how to respond to something, what's right or what's wrong. It's a challenge, right? And I'm challenged by my daughters to see things with fresh eyes, the fresh eyes of not knowing in the bardo. So I feel a lot of gratefulness for that. So another question that comes to me when I'm contemplating this old farmer, though, is, okay, well, so how did he do it? How did this old farmer approach his life that way? In my view, he practiced seeing, not just looking at his experience, but really seeing it, practicing it. For example, he encounters horses, his own horse, the 3 horses that come to him the next day, his son breaking a leg, right? He sees the horse, for example. As a point of contrast, let's consider the way we commonly view horses. Think of a horse. Imagine a horse, your own experience with horse for a second. The name, the word, horse. In French, horse is cheval. In Spanish, it's caballo. We also probably have certain feelings and ideas about horses, about horse, about its usefulness and its meaning or value. Maybe we've ridden a horse or owned a horse. Horse has a certain economic or aesthetic value. I think of my wife who in a few years ago when we were on vacation in Estes Park was riding a horse and got bucked off. And I know she has some definite, very definite ideas about horses. Well, now the old Taoist farmer used the horse to work his crops. We might say that the farmer owns the horse, that he has a story of the horse, about how the horse helps him earn a living. But when we attach ourselves to these ideas and identify with them, how clearly are we seeing horse, a particular horse? I mean, let's be clear. This horse has a different experience of itself, separate from our story of it. Horse certainly doesn't view itself as part of a local or personal economy. And in this particular instance, I love the way when the horse disappears one day and then comes back, it comes back with three friends, three wild horses accompanying it, right? This horse has a mysterious life about which we know nothing. It has its own sense of being. And in this story, right, when the horse comes back with its three partners, right? What happened? What's that about, right? There's something wondrous and mysterious there about that horse. Horse resists our attempt to box it up and layer it in a story. Flicker of ear, bright big eyes, swishing tail, earthy, rich, musty scent. Who are we when we run our hands across its hide? In the farmer's case, he has developed a different way of experiencing the horse. He has defamiliarized himself with the dualistic way of experiencing the horse and himself in relationship to the horse and the horse in relationship to its tasks on the farm, etc., and the world. He is in the Bardo, where problems arise and fall, and where solutions are built and destroyed. Again, so a question I keep thinking about, that I come back to with this tale, though, is how did the farmer do this? What enabled him to see the horse, to see his experiences in this way, while the villagers couldn't? How does the farmer detach himself from outcomes? I bet you anything he was practicing Zazen. He practiced over and over and over, being present with what is right in front of him, seeing it, engaging the direct experience network in his brain, and truly opening himself to experiencing and seeing what was right in front of him. I asked myself, can I be like that farmer? How am I like that farmer? How am I like those villagers who come to the farmer? I love that fulcrum, that pivot point in this tale between the farmer between the farmer and the villagers, where their what's real is called into question. I'll conclude with a quote that I found, which I think speaks to this issue of seeing really nicely. Frederick Frank, in his book, The Zen of Seeing and Drawing as Meditation, says, "The glaring contrast between seeing and looking at the world around us is immense. It is fateful. Everything in our society seems to conspire against our inborn human gift of seeing. We have become addicted to merely looking at things and beings. The more we regress from seeing to looking at the world through the ever more perfected machinery of viewfinders, TV tubes, VCRs, microscopes, spectroscopes, stereoscopes. By the way, this was written 30 years ago, and I would add to this now screens of one sort or another, right? The less we see. The less we see, the more we are numbed. The more we are numbed, we become to the more numbed we become to the joy and the pain of being alive, and further estranged we become from ourselves and all others. So, I guess my question for us this evening is, how do we practice seeing? How conscious of we of that pivot point, or that difference between seeing and looking at something? Are there moments when we catch ourselves looking at something and not seeing it? Or are there moments when we recognize that we're seeing something, or we were seeing something and not looking at it? What insights have we gained in the Bardo? How are we swimming in this most volatile of currents? I know for me, what comes up immediately is my life with my family and my daughters, right? My daughters are they're in the bardo of being new teenagers. They just turned 13 2 or 3 weeks ago, right? So they're in that intermediary place, right? And I'm right there with them, and it's not easy.